Hello and welcome again. I am so excited to have my friend Tara Cessna with us today. Tara is a board certified behavior analyst who has been working in the field for over 20 years. She currently serves as Senior VP of Development at the Bierman Autism Centers and is the founder of the Treasure Coast Autism Project, which is a private not-for-profit school for autistic students. She serves as an expert panelist for the Home and Community Positive Behavior Support, and where she and other parents professionals provide information and resources to caregivers of special needs children. Tara specializes in working with individuals that engage in inappropriate sexual behaviors that place them at risk for exploitation, harassment, and legal concerns. Tara has provided training and has co-authored two books on this topic. The first, a textbook geared towards caregivers and therapists, entitled Cases on Teaching Sexuality Education to Individuals with Autism, as well as the book geared towards therapists starting in the field of applied behavior analysis, entitled Behavior Foundations, A Guide to Develop Your Behavior Analytic Skill Set. Welcome, Tara.
Well, thank you, Teresa. It's so nice to chat with you again and see your lovely face. I'm so happy to be here tonight.
Thank you so much. It's always awesome chatting with you because you know what? We've known each other for a while now.
Over a
And
decade.
yeah, yeah. And I always learn something from you every time we talk.
Oh,
So,
ditto.
yeah, super excited to be hanging out with you again, my friend. Um, so I want to start because I remember working with a family and mom said to me, well, my child has autism, so I'll never have to worry about him and sex. Like it'll never be a thing. Now, please clear up this misconception for us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is one of many misconceptions that we hear. So one is that, because they're autistic, that they're either going to be asexual or not interested in, romantic partnerships and relationships. You know,
Mhm.
we have to help families understand that we're going to develop, emotionally at the same rate, physically the same rate as our neurotypical peers. So we want to help to set the stage that this is coming, right? We want to engage in teaching skills that are going to help them for that lifetime, that lifespan. When you have a 5-year-old child, you're not thinking about what they're going to be when they get married or go off into the world or graduate or do those things, live independently. It seems so far off. But as a parent of a child in college, it comes so quickly. And so we've got to start planning that now. Other misconceptions, Teresa, that I hear is, oh, because my child is born female, that she identifies as female. And so
Mhm.
what we've learned, like with the research now, is showing that high functioning, and I hate to use that term, but higher capable autistic women on the spectrum report higher rates of like asexuality, bisexuality, and homosexuality than their neurotypical peers. And so we have to think about that as well. And now it's not just as simple as teaching you're a female because you're born with this anatomy, or you're a male because you're born with this anatomy. It's now thinking about how do they identify? And does it mean that because I'm born female, that I'm going to automatically want a male partner? Not necessarily. So we have to really, think about the intuitions of our loved ones and what, they're geared toward and kind of foster that, right? We don't want to be closed minded and force them into something that we think, should be the path for them. Um, I don't know if you have comments on that, but there's more like misconceptions that we can, I mean, there's so many.
I can only imagine. And like I said, I've heard a few of them. And for me, it was a little scary because then I thought, so we're not going to teach this child because we don't think they need them to learn. So then what happens when, there's a situation?
Yeah, it's definitely it's going to happen whether they recognize, and there's some individuals that never want particularly to be around people, and that's okay. We don't want to force that either. It's fine to be alone and to be content with that. But for those that really want to seek out a meaningful relationship, we need to start teaching those skills early. And so I'll often get like, well, how do I even teach that? And so, what I like to do with families is think about like a sexuality plan, right? So your teenager, your young adult is coming to you, or even your adult is coming to you saying, I want a boyfriend. I want to go out and do online dating. I want to be able to masturbate to completion. I want to do these things. And maybe they're not verbalizing it, but you can tell that this is their desire. What we need to think about is mapping this out for them. So what skills does this individual currently possess, right? Maybe they're, let's say online dating is our target. Maybe they're able to, use internet and social media, which we know many of our children can. Maybe they understand how to be safe. Maybe they've already learned those skills. Maybe they are well groomed and have the skills to be presentable if they're trying to online date. But we have to think about too now where do they want to go, and if it's to find that partner, what are the skills that are lacking? Maybe I look presentable and I know how to use the technology. However,
Mm.
what I say can oftentimes be inappropriate, or maybe I'm not able to read the other individual and maybe they're not interested in me, but I continue to perseverate. Maybe they liked me, liked my image, or I don't know, I don't use online dating, but maybe, they did something in the chat to make me think they were interested. So I continue to perseverate on them, not recognizing that if they don't come back to me, right? If they don't respond or reciprocate, that they may not be interested. So that then becomes harassment and there are charges that can be pressed. So there's all these little nuances that, okay, these are the things that we need to teach to close the gaps. Because for you and I, we would recognize if I messaged somebody 5 times and they didn't get back to me, okay, understood, right? But for others, it's I remember that one time that you said hello, so I want to continue to engage. And so teaching them little nuances, body language, that's very challenging. So the sexuality plan really just maps out where they're trying to go and the skills we need to close, right? Those deficits that we recognize, starting with their strengths, always with their strengths. So that's just one way to start broaching that topic.
Awesome. And when should we start start broaching this topic? Because, I'm sure it varies, but is there like, do you have a time where you say, okay, now this young person is ready? Like, how can parents tell, especially with a child who is neurodiverse? It's a challenging dance.
It is a challenging dance. I want to say that we want to start this early and often. And it's not that we're going to go into the 5-year-old child is not going to learn about, sexuality necessarily, but they're going to start to learn about good touch and bad touch. They're going to learn about
Mm,
private parts. They're going to learn about the right names for the penis and the vagina. You're going to use the right terminology.
mhm,
Talking about boundaries, safe boundaries, personal boundaries, vocalizing or expressing when somebody does something that may make you uncomfortable. So we're starting those conversations. I've worked with hundreds of families. And some of the things that I've noticed when we wait too long, I had a boy who we didn't talk about, puberty changing in his body as anything. So when I got to him, what was happening is he was damaging his penis because he would wake up with an erection and wanted it off. Basically, that's all he could say was off. And he didn't understand. He wasn't prepared that this would happen. And it scared him and he didn't like it. It was a change in his body that didn't occur before. So that was something we had to like now teach after the fact, after he's already experiencing some form of trauma and not excited about these changes. Another one was a child that he started getting pubic hair before anybody had mentioned that this would be your changing body, and he was pulling it out by the roots, just wanted the body to be what it was. And so it can be very scary for our learners. You have to think about when our bodies start changing, our routines have to start changing, right? I have to shower more frequently. I have to use deodorant. For females, I have to use feminine products. I have to do these things, but I didn't have to do. They're now newly introduced. So if we start the conversations early and take our child's lead, let them ask questions, let them be inquisitive, follow, what their guidance, right? And then give them information as needed and make them prepared. Especially our young females that, I mean, the majority, nearly 100%, and not all, but nearly 100% of women are going to get a period and menstruate in their life. And it's going to last for probably half
mhm.
of their lifetime. So if we can't teach them how to appropriately and independently address this, they could have to wait, right, for individuals to help them. That's not upholding their dignity. That's not gonna be carried over. Like, so I always talk to parents, think about the things that you're doing for your loved one now, that if you were to pass tomorrow, who would have to pick up these duties and these tasks? And if you're the one changing the pad for your loved one, that's something that we want to change and work on. We want to make sure that they can independently, no matter their functioning level, we can teach menstrual skills. We can teach them, hygiene. We can do these things, and we just break them down into very discrete steps. And that's what we can kind of talk about is like, how do we teach? How do we teach personal hygiene? How do we teach regimented and health management and medication management and It's breaking skills down into small, discrete steps, finding out where the child has gaps, modeling it for them, giving them visual schedules, giving them checklists, breaking them down. Social stories are something that can be great in teaching these skills. For those that are unfamiliar with social stories, they are complete. Carol Gray came up with this concept. They are very short, individualized stories that are addressed for that individual and the skill that they're trying to obtain. So when we write a social story, we write it in the first person, and we also talk about the behaviors that we want them to engage in. And I have this story. So I was working with a young girl, and she was having trouble at school. So I was going to come into her school and see what was going on. And as I'm entering the hallway, I hear this loud screaming, just very loud. And so I asked the person that's walking me to the classroom, "What's happening? Who is that?" She said, that's your girl. This is the behaviors we've been engaging in. We've given her a social story and she keeps screaming." I said, "Okay, let's see what's going on." Well, in the story that she's reading to herself, her social story, it says, "I will not scream in the classroom." Well, instead of telling her what she shouldn't be doing, we need to tell her what she should be doing. So I just reworded it and said, "I will use my inside voice in the classroom." And so, the next time she read that story, there was no more screaming. I said, "How did you do that?" "I didn't do it. I just changed the words. That's all I did." So it's as simple as that. So let them know what they should be doing. I think that's a main point.
Yes, because it's always so easy to say, stop that, don't do that, instead of saying, do this, and I see it a lot in the schools. Stop running. It's like, just tell the child to walk, please,
Yeah.
it's a lot
If I have to
easier.
stop, what can I do? And you think, well, we assume that because I say stop running, they know that the next behavior would be to walk. They don't all the time. So we have to say it. What should I be doing? And that's all
Yeah.
we need to do. And so we should always be positive, especially with social sexual education. It's something we want to keep very positive. We
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're comfortable in teaching it and talking about it before we broach the topic. Know that, use your resources, use your community, use your teachers, and other professionals that are there to help you, especially if you as a parent are not comfortable in talking about these things. And that's one of the topics we discussed in the book that we wrote for behavior analysts, and
Mhm.
in newly certified folks, is we gave a self-assessment to say, how comfortable are you in teaching these topics? Because if they're not, what we find is that they're not teaching it, and they're kind of dismissing it, they're overlooking it, they're redirecting to something else when clearly this
Mhm.
is a skill that needs to be taught. Everybody in their life is going to go through these changes, these hormonal changes, these new wants and new desires, and we've got to know as practitioners how to help them through that.
Absolutely. Now, not that I like to dwell on negative, but what are some of the dangers if we do not teach our children, artistic children, our neurodiverse children about sex and sexuality? What could we come up against?
Yeah, so I'll talk about two case studies, two individuals that I was working with, both of them teenagers. I'll start with the male. We had done a lot of good for him in the training of masturbation, talking him to go about going into he has to be in a private bathroom, he has to be alone, all of those things because he used to do it publicly. And so he learned that. Right now I know that I need to be in a private room. It needs to be in the bathroom, the door needs to be closed. Well, he ended up going, we took him to the library for a therapy session and he had to use the restroom. Well, he went in there and he began masturbating.
Mhm.
However, there was a little child in the stall next to him that could hear him, that felt like he was, well, to the little child, looked like a big man. It was showing him his penis, but it really wasn't that. It was this autistic individual that was masturbating what he thought was privately because it was a bathroom, but it wasn't. So that little child came out, told his mom. The mom called the police. Um, for PHI and HIPAA reasons, I can't tell the officer that this individual is autistic. I am only there as a support, right? I can't even say that I'm a behavior analyst.
Mhm.
Luckily, the cop picked up on the individual, right, and recognized that this was a skill deficit. This wasn't meant to be harmful in any way. So we averted arrest there, but that was, very traumatic for the little boy and his mother, but also for my client because he didn't understand what he was doing wrong, right? The other one, there's two. I had a client that was raped. Now she had an intellectual disability and she loved to go out to what she called the club. She wanted to go to the club, and beautiful young woman thought that these men were there because they liked her, right? That they thought that she was pretty and nice and smart and all the things. But all they truly wanted to do was abuse her. And she didn't pick up on the cues, right? She just didn't pick up on those. And unfortunately, by the time I started working with her, the rape had already happened, and I was brought in thereafter to help make sure that this doesn't happen continually. But she was left on the side of the road, intellectually disabled after being raped and having to find her way home. Luckily, a good Samaritan stopped and got her to the hospital. But that this is what can happen. I had another young girl, 16, and she was very hypersexual. And she grabbed her teacher in his penis and asked him to touch her breasts. Now, as you can imagine, as an adult male, how scary that could be too, because as people witness this, like, what did you do to entice her to bring about these behaviors? So he wanted to press charges and keep her out of his classroom. Now, mind you, this was a special school for individuals on the spectrum. This was the best one to fit her needs in her local environment. We had nowhere else to put her. If he was going to force her to be kicked out, or at least kicked from the program, where were we going to put her? So I had to get in and help change these behaviors, and that's what we started working on, is really teaching, what does respect mean? Respect of myself and respect of others. And respect is such a broad, subjective concept, and it means different things to everybody. But when I break it down for these individuals, for them, it was, somebody that is kind to me, somebody that reciprocates, somebody that wants to be with me, takes me places, shares, those are the kinds of things. And so we have to say, like, what are your non-negotiables? If these things aren't happening, does this person truly like you? And we can create checklists, visual checklists. And I did have a checklist for one of my learners to make sure that she was monitoring this, to say, is he hitting these boxes? And if not, I need to walk away. So that's just some of the tips we had.
Yeah, because I mean, just trying to get people to understand, the importance of this. I mean, that's why I wanted you to come on, because it could lead to really dire circumstances, dire consequences if
Absolutely.
they're not taught self-harm and then harm to others, and others harming them. So it's really important that I want parents to be just so aware of the fact that this, you know it's taboo for people to talk about. It's crazy that it still is, right? But I just want to take that Band-Aid off and start talking about this. Now, I had a situation. I contracted at a preschool, and there was a 3-year-old who would masturbate herself to sleep. And teachers were like, what do we do? So what do we do, Tara?
So, it amazes people that we see masturbation as early as, like you said, 3 years old. The first thing we have to do is make sure and rule out that there's nothing happening to this child that is teaching them these behaviors. Once you rule out that there wasn't some form of abuse, molestation, anything of that nature, and this is truly them soothing themselves, right, to sleep, we have to start teaching them appropriate places. And now I actually had a 4-year-old that was engaging in this, a female. But for her, she was doing it on objects. And what happened was she ended up getting injured. She was doing it very often and on the objects. And so she injured herself. So what we taught her to do was masturbate using a shower nozzle in her bathtub when she's alone. Now, a couple of things to think about. Um, they're not going to find shower nozzles in the school, right? They're not going to find it in the grocery store. So it's now this discrete behavior where she's only going to get the shower nozzle in certain environments, and that one is only in her home environment. So we're shaping that behavior to be done in a way that would force her to do it privately, and one that was going to be less injurious, because obviously she was really injuring herself. For the little girl at school, we have to think of other ways to self-soothe. Now, it sounds like if she was doing that at nap time, what are the other skills we can teach her? Possibly rocking, humming, maybe somebody, unfortunately, I know you just had the sleep person on, but maybe they do rub their back, something to help them soothe in a way. Oh, is that okay? Help them to soothe in a way that isn't going to be on their genitals. We also have to talk about private parts, private behavior, when to do it and when not. So it's called discrimination training. And what I use is a red card and a green card. A green card means that this is when I can masturbate and where I can. And my green card is in my bathroom or my bedroom, and that's it. The red card is everywhere else. And so if she starts to masturbate, I'm showing her the red card. I'm reminding her of the things we can do instead to self-soothe. Now, mind you, teaching self-soothing, not in that moment, because she's already wants to engage in the, sexual gratification. We're teaching self-soothing throughout. So I start her day with self-soothing. Remember to blow out your candles. Let's do our deep breathing. Oh, let's hum our favorite song. Let's rub our arms. Those are the kinds of things I'm practicing so that when it's time for her to go to bed and she goes to do this, I'm going to say, remember what we talked about. Remember to do our breathing. I'm reminding of these things and she can do those instead. And then she gets reinforced for it. I'm going to give her something tangible, typically at first, to shape that behavior. And then eventually over time, it's all faded out and she can soothe now.
Right. Now, my thing is, because I hear the parents in my head, what if I allow my 3-year-old to masturbate, wouldn't they become over sexualized?
Um, you know, that's a great question and a great concern, but they're already engaging in it. It was funny. I did have somebody say they were new to the field. They were shadowing me, and we were teaching them about social sexual education. And they said, do autistic individuals masturbate more than anybody else? And I said, no. They just don't realize that they shouldn't do it in front of us, right? People are doing it all the time. They're just doing it discreetly. So it may seem like they're doing it a lot for their certain age, as long as it's not hindering their daily functioning, right?
Mhm.
When it becomes the point where they can't function and can't get through a meal, can't get through their day at school, can't stop thinking about it, can't, if they're over social media, it's right to porn. That's when we have to think about addictive behaviors, right? That's when we seek additional help. But if it is truly just self gratification, if it feels good to do it, so they do it a couple of times a day. It's actually typical, and we just got to make sure that we shape it to a safe environment.
Got it. Now, you talked about, the changes in the bodies and what happens. Now, how do you prepare a child for that?
Yeah, well, you want to use a lot of resources, right? I'll say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there are a lot of good books out there. I actually took some notes on it. Let me look. I like Linda Medeiros created My Body Myself, and it's for both
Mhm.
boys and girls. And I like this because it has checklists, it has journals, it has quizzes, and it kind of helps them as they're like, working through this, changing stage of their life. The American Girl Library also has My Changing Body. So there's a lot you can find. There's tangible books, there's things online. My most favorite curriculum, and it's free and it's online, is called Sexuality Across the Lifespan. It has resources for parents, resources for therapists. It's got visuals. It's there to help you through these conversations. It's there to help your loved one come to terms with their changing bodies and the new expectations that will be placed on them for hygiene and, menstrual care and all of the things and shaving and deodorant and, gosh, it's just a lot. But it does help. So I'd say, use the resources. Also collaborate with your community and, your providers, your teachers, the things that service providers, anybody that's helping and working with your loved one to help say what has worked in the past, and use those strategies.
Got it. Awesome. Now, I'm gonna backtrack just a little bit. Now, if you could, because I'm sure your book is also a resource, what are some of the topics that you cover there that can help parents?
So, well, in the case studies book, what I liked about this book, it was a bunch of authors. We came together because Dr. Peggy Schaefer Whitby is a professor, and she recognized that parents didn't have information and therapists were not being taught how to teach this information. So she put a call to papers out to say, hey, community, hey, researchers, let me know if you've worked with social sexual behaviors before. Give me a case study. I'll let you know if we can publish it. So we had a bunch of authors that came in. And so for this book, some of the topics are menstruation care, right? We have a case study on, somebody was talking about menstruation care. We have a case study on teaching about gender identity. We have a case study on ethics and teaching, social sexual behaviors. What are the ethics that surround it? Um, Reducing sexual behaviors in community settings. That's what I talked about. The legal parameters that surround, us doing that. Some of them were like psychosocial development in peers. So in teenagers, excuse me. So that's some of the topics in the case studies book. And
Mhm.
then in the sexuality book that we wrote for practitioners, we were looking at what are the skills you're going to need to teach and how are you going to teach them? And we gave them templates for sexuality plans, for person centered planning, like things like that, self assessments to say, how comfortable are you in teaching this skill? So
Mhm.
that's the kind of resources they'll get there.
Awesome. Yeah. And I just want to speak to if you're not comfortable, as a practitioner, get some help, right? Don't try
Yes.
to go it alone, get some help. And same for parents. If you don't know how to approach the subject, there's so like Tara talked about all the resources that are out there. Talk to people, tap into your community. It does take a village, right? We're better when we tap into our village.
Absolutely. I do just want to put it out there that there are some families that their cultures do not believe in masturbation. They do not believe in premarital sex. And we have to, as therapists, make sure that we're not teaching skills that parents don't want us to teach. So that's the other, thought behind that too. So making sure we're getting permission from our caregivers that it's a plan that we're doing together and not in isolation.
Exactly. And yeah, I'm going to speak to that just a tad too, because so often when, we go into homes and parents are like, okay, bye. Or, they go into another room and if you're, and I'm just speaking to the parents, if your provider does that, just because you want to learn too, this learning doesn't happen in isolation. Get in there, figure out, because the plan should be developed by parent and therapist.
Yeah.
So it's a collaboration.
Absolutely. And
Uh,
sometimes so we collaborate on the intervention. And I may start the intervention to make their child comfortable in the moment and comfortable with like speaking about these things because it can be uncomfortable, especially if your mom or dad are sitting there and your opposite sex parent is there. It's like, oh my God, no, I don't want to talk about this. So I get them comfortable first, and then I bring the parents in and we teach them together. So sometimes you might be in isolation in the beginning, but the
mhm.
interventions have already been, agreed upon by parents, therapists, the whole gamut of of the team.
Yeah, because yeah, sometimes it is easier to speak to a stranger than your parent, isn't
Oh yeah,
it?
you can see that they get red and they giggle a lot or they hide and it's like, all right, you're not ready yet. Well, we're gonna work through this.
Right. And thank you, because yes, we have to know when they are ready. And like you said, these are some of the signs of readiness.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And just give us a couple more signs that, a child is ready to discuss this before we close.
Well, again, early and often, right? Is all I'm going to say, and I want to make sure again using the right terminology, making sure that they understand safety, that they have respect for their bodies and the bodies of others, because so often I see that our learners are abusing others and they don't even realize it, right? They're touching people
Mhm.
inappropriately. They're saying things that are inappropriate. They're, continually reaching out to them, which is like almost like stalking behavior, or, it's just, we want to make sure that they understand boundaries. And social circles is a great way to teach this. I love circles, the curriculum, and it really talks about what we can say with different people in our lives versus our family and our neighbors and our teachers and strangers, right? And it gets out, we have these circles and they expand outward. And so I like that curriculum to help, teach these skills too.
Awesome. Oh my goodness, Miss Tara, you have packed a whole lot of information in this half hour. I just thank you so much. Parents, please don't be afraid, because we just really want to prepare your child for this great event, which could be a great event if done correctly, as opposed to something that could cause them harm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's not taboo unless we make it taboo.
exactly. Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, my friends.
Absolutely. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate you having me on the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.